CASAT Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to Season 4 of CASAT Conversations. I am your host, Heather Haslam. This season, we will explore the impact of trauma on those who work in human services. You'll hear from researchers, authors, and people with lived experience. We hope you enjoy today's conversation. Today we welcome Dr. Michael Christie. Dr. Christie is a facilitator, coach, and chaplain. We are thrilled to have him join us today. Welcome, Dr. Christie.
Thank you. Good to be here, Heather.
So I'd love for you to share with us about yourself and why you do the work that you do.
I'm a chaplain, as it was mentioned, with the Department of Correction. Got there kind of a strange way. In some ways, some might call it a calling. I grew up in the projects in Connecticut. Went to school, University of Connecticut. Probably not as prepared as I should have been, but with determination, kind of made it through that. Worked in the biotech space for a number of years. Then there was a downsizing back in 2011, 2009. And I was always an ordained clergy, so I decided to do some work in the prison system where I was volunteering before. And my initial intention was to do it kind of briefly and to get out of it, but I got there and just fell in love with the work and meeting the needs of men, mostly men. I work in the men's facilities. And on my path there, I done several things. My doctorate is in ministry, and I've done several other studies surrounding really what I call transformative work. So, got certified in mindfulness as a mindfulness instructor, Nonviolent Communication NVC, Neuro-Linguistic Programming EFT, and IFS, which is Internal Family Systems. That's just a few of the things, but I was just drawn to anything that can help people transform their lives. And that really showed up for me in the prison, because as much as I was offering teachings and sermons and preaching and inspiration to the men, I saw that there was something missing for them in the work. They would often come to church and the services and leave and really on a high, talking, very inspired. And then for some of them, not all, they'd come back, and I often wondered why. And then I realized that some don't have the capacity to hold the spiritual gains that they've made, primarily because of trauma. And so I really got involved in educating myself in how to be more trauma informed and how to have more of a trauma informed presence. And so all of the modalities I mentioned earlier I use to kind of inform me and to navigate my way with the incarcerated, and not just incarcerated. I do personal coaching as well outside of the prison, and just love the work I do to kind of heal. A lot of healing with folks from past events, from being stuck in certain things, certain thinking, certain mindsets, just so folks can kind of live their best selves. So that's kind of the work that I do in a nutshell.
Awesome. Do you also work with the corrections officers, or do you work primarily with
Yes.
the inmates?
Thank you. So my role is I'm chaplain for both staff and inmates. And so initially when I got there, the staff really saw me like they see most chaplains, prison chaplains, as there for the inmates. But it was part of our mission that we're there for the staff as well. And if we can have resilience on both sides, and if we can have both sides having empathy for themselves and each other, then it's a better space and place to be. So I see almost as many staff members as I see inmates. Folks come into my office just to say, "Hey, this is going on in my life. This is going on at work," and to help them kind of navigate through this, and oftentimes just to help them regulate themselves because they're feeling supercharged about something that is going on.
And, as you mentioned, being trauma informed and the need for that, I'd love for you to speak about really some of the trauma that you see, and what that looks like, if you can kind of highlight that for us.
Yeah. So one of the gifts that the Department of Correction gave me was I went to the facilities as a pretty educated man and went there with the teacher mindset that I was going to teach the inmates a few things. But I quickly realized that I was a student, and they were teaching me as much as or more than I was teaching them. And one of the things I discovered was that I had trauma. I was never fully aware and in touch of my own trauma, and my own trauma as just being a black man in America. And so seeing that made me realize that a lot of these guys grew up in some of the towns and the places I grew up. Um, but trauma affected us all differently, how we kind of process and interpreted that. And so, how I see it showed up for many of the men was oftentimes abandonment from their parents. And many of them had the pathology of the incarcerated is that oftentimes the parents themselves are addicts or have significant trauma themselves. And so there was just horrendous the stories I would hear of abandonment and neglect. Um, and it wasn't, when I say neglect, I use that word somewhat carefully because I don't think any parent really wants to neglect their children. That they're doing it out of their own sense of scarcity and fear, and their own survival, trying to survive themselves, and oftentimes not having that stuff modeled themselves that they can model it for their children in terms of how to love and care for them and nurture them. So um, I saw lots of that, lots of really dysregulated men, um, uh, guys that really had not processed a lot of the traumas in their life, a lot of the kind of hurt and the abandonment stuff that had happened to them in their earlier years, and got labeled by the system, and almost surrendered to the labels after a while because no one was understanding that their behavior was really a cry for help, not because they wanted to be disruptive or aggressive or cause harm to folks. So those are some of the highlights in terms of the things that I saw and noticed. And I also noticed that many of them are yearning and longing to have clarity and ease and to overcome what I call their demons, right? These things that kind of grip them to fall into certain patterns, patterns of thinking and patterns of behavior. They want that, but they don't have the resources. They don't have someone coaching or modeling or or helping them to acquire the skills to kind of deal with their fears and to notice their triggers and the sorts of thing that would help them to kind of move forward on the path of what I call wholeness and healing.
I'm really curious your thoughts on like the prison system in and of itself. Do you think
hmm
like how would you characterize trauma just within the system itself?
So I really think that the world, certainly America, needs to look at it this way: that um, prison systems are really trauma institutions, and so um, practically everyone in the system, including staff, has have some trauma. But certainly the incarcerated comes there with a significant amount of trauma. Um, but we don't have a trauma presence or we don't have a trauma lens in caring for not all people. I'm certain there are others that do, that having this trauma sensitivity will really shift how we engage with inmates. We'll really realize that the behavior or the aggression or the um, how they approach you, one is really coming from their survival brain, um, and it's what they've learned, it's how they've learned to survive throughout their lives, and so It doesn't excuse behavior, and doesn't mean that we, like a kumbaya, that we're not cautious and we don't move with care, but we also move understanding that there's a way that you can get more compliance and get more collaboration if you have more sensitivity that about trauma and how to approach somebody that is um, triggered because of trauma. So, what a gift to the world it would be if our governments would really um, resource institutions to have folks that are trauma informed and to care for and to train the staff as well that they might be trauma informed. That does two things. You're not only caring for the inmates, but they're caring for themselves and how they relate to each other. I mean, prisons are very stressful environments. I mean, the nature of it is a high level stress all on its own. So to be resourced to be able to navigate a stressful environment, just to be a little bit more resilient and to be more self-aware, to pay more attention of yourself, to pay more attention of your own biases, to pay more attention of your own triggers, to notice when there's a shift in you from being calm to being irritated and frustrated, that you have some tools to be able to take care of that, and you're encouraged to take care of it instead of what are you doing or being chastised or wondering whether the supervisors are going to look at you funny because you take some time off to go take some breaths just to calm yourself down so you can deal with the situation more appropriately. So I think it's really a win-win situation if we develop and institute the fabric of more trauma-informed care.
And you spoke about really, seeing so many dysregulated men in the work that you do, and I
Hmm.
would imagine you see that both in staff and inmates. And so
Hmm.
what are some of the techniques that you use to help people regulate?
So I teach a mindfulness in the prison to both staff and to inmates. There's an organization called Mindfulness of Public Safety, uh, which is a Fleet Mall, which does great work across the country, teaching law enforcement how to do mindfulness to help them to regulate and to navigate their workspace more effectively. So mindfulness is a very big part of what I teach. What is included in that package is really teaching folks about their bodies, about their breath. I also use NVC, which is nonviolent communication, which is it's a language for you to cultivate empathy for yourself and other people, and a way to kind of process your feeling and how you ask or make a request of someone to get your needs met, whatever those needs might be, without being demanding or aggressive or violent, and a host of other modalities. Just really teaching folks to want to befriend your feeling, even the feeling that you don't like, even the feeling of irritation, frustration. But the biggest tool I would say that I use is breath work, and helping them to just pause, learn how to pause and take a few breaths. Um, Learn how to do a body scan, which is a mindfulness and meditation technique, because many of these men struggle to sleep at night. They're full of anxiety, and we know that being mindful about your breathing and taking deep breaths forces your autonomic nervous system to calm. It's a way to calm your body and to calm your nerves. And the calmer you are, the more you're connected to your resources that you have, whatever resources that might be. When you're irritated or agitated, you kind of lose contact with your resources, and you go to fight flight, where it's the macho male that is showing up fighting for survival, even when there's nothing to really fight about. So um, those are the some of the tools that I think I rely on most. And then when I do deeper work, one-on-one work with some of the men, I'll use internal family system, which essentially is dealing with earlier um, schemas that they developed in their lives, or earlier ways that they think that this is how life is supposed to be or how I'm supposed to live, and help them to unpack that. But help them to do that in a way that is not judging, non-judgmental to themselves and to others. So love using IFS work to do that. And there's one other tool. there's one other thing which matters, and is to invite folks to incorporate their own spirituality, their own sense of faith, their own sense of the sacred and the divine. That is a really important part, because sometimes it's we separate coaching and counseling folks from a very profound resource, which is their spiritual resource. So that was my addendum.
So much to unpack there. I want to start with really, what have you seen as the impact of introducing these practices, techniques for the people that you serve?
There is a waiting list to come into the classes that I have for these, and from all faiths, whether they're Muslim, Catholic, Christian, you name it, whatever their religious tradition is. There is this profound hunger to learn how to regulate oneself, um, and they often tell me it's almost like getting high when they come to the meditation class. I hate to use those words, but the sense of ease and calm that it brings to them, um, the sense of being in touch with themselves, um, and not having their mind flooded with anxiety and frustration, um, is a real gift. And so there's a yearning to really learn. Yeah. And if I'm honest, many of them come. I do guided meditation, and so many of them come so they can be guided. And a few of them will take it up on their own and bring it back to the dorms. And I've had tons of stories of guys that say, "Oh yeah, I almost got into a fight, and I paused and went away and took a few deep breaths, like you said, and boy, that made all the difference in the world." He said the urge to kind of react and be aggressive just kind of left me. I was able to think clearly and go, you know what, this is not worth it, right? If I do this, it's going to get me more trouble than anything. So I've had plenty of stories like that where guys said, you know, um, just walking away and breathing, or breathing in even in the moment, taking a few breaths and pausing, or just leaving and going back to their cells or their rooms, their dorms, and sitting and just doing, just paying attention to them, how they were feeling and breathing, really helped them to stay out of trouble, and to stay calm. And there are times when that doesn't work, right? They're too flooded, and they're too deep into dysregulation to not do what they automatically usually do, which is maybe act out of aggressively towards someone else.
Well, and I think of, you talked about the environment being inherently stressful, which then
Hmm.
puts us into survival mode. And if you're in survival mode, it is hard to take that pause at times, especially when your life is at stake. I mean, that's an extreme example, but still.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's a great point. So the facilities that I work on, I think America has might have a misconception of prison. The stuff that you see on TV where folks are walking around with shanks trying to kill everybody. Where I am in most of the prisons I've been to, that's not the case. There are prisons like that. Um, if you realize that these jails and prisons, these men are there in somewhat, voluntary is not the word, but they they don't have to agree to the rules. They could go there and really cause chaos, but they do. Um, and but to your point, about it really being a stressful environment on so many levels, you've lost your rights, you lost your, well, they might believe they've lost their sense of power, they lost their sense of choice. Someone is telling you what to do, when to eat, when to go to bed. Um, on top of your freedom and the disconnection from your family and the stress of not knowing what's happening to your family. Is your girl still waiting for you, or did she find somebody else? I mean, there's all of these kind of thoughts that are racing through the mind. And all of that is on top of someone that's probably most likely already traumatized. So they already have a hypersensitive and amygdala, where they're, even the littlest thing, which might not be a big deal to us, might be seem like a threat to them. Um, so they might react. So all of that is occurring for them. And so to be able to, I'm amazed that it stays as calm as it does. because we haven't addressed the issue for the most part. These guys do have access to mental health, um, but mental health are swamped because really prisons are mental health facilities. They become mental health facilities, but there is not enough. But we probably need probably need to switch the ratio of mental health care workers to or at least match those of the correction officers that are there. So the population can get the care that they need. And I think if they get that care, the likelihood of them returning home more resource to kind of manage some of their stress will be different, which will also help them to potentially reduce the recidivism rate for them coming back because they don't have the skill set to kind of navigate and to realize that, oh, I'm being triggered, right? Don't fall into this trap. I know what to do. I'll walk away and go breathe, right? And I do that before it's a 10, right? I start to notice when it's a 3 where I have the capacity to walk away. And then I don't wait till it's a 10 or 8 where there's no walking away, right? Your survival brains have already hijacked you, and and it's in fight or flight at that point.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When you're introducing these practices, how much do you think language matters and how you present these different practices or teach them?
Oh, language matters a lot, and so certainly um, the language of invitation that you're inviting folks to do something and not telling them, the language that embodies choice, that you're giving them choice, that is not just one way to do something, but here are a couple of options. You pick what best works for you. And the choice to also say that none of this is working for you, kind of do what you see, do what works for you, right? With some boundaries, but that you built in choice in your language. And that most importantly, that you do not have the language of the fixer, that I'm not the expert coming to fix you because you're broken. And I know how to fix you. I got all the screws and tools and hammers and whatever it is to kind of beat good in you. So I think all of those, the language that attends to all of that, really creates the space for safety.
Mm.
Creates the space so they can feel safe enough to peep in and to peer in, because particularly in mindfulness, mindfulness can be scary for a traumatized person. And so, giving them the option to keep their eyes open or to close it, because in prison, to tell somebody to close their eyes, they might not feel safe. Whether they're in prison or not. If you're traumatized, you could be home and don't feel really safe closing your eyes. That depends on your life experiences. So to let them know that they have choice, kind of remind them that yeah, you have the power to choose, right? Because part of trauma is feeling that you don't have choice, that you've lost the power to choose, that you have no power. So we use language to kind of um, invite them, remind them to touch that again, that you have some choice in this and you have some matter in this. Not only in this moment, really, is that you have choice in your life. You have uh, matter. You can, take the matter on uh, for yourself as you're going forward.
And I would imagine their experience in your class, and then their peers either hearing about it or noticing the practices, then is why perhaps you have wait lists for your class, which is very cool.
Absolutely. The guys go back and they're so excited. I've had really big wrestler looking guys, like linebackers in the class bawling because the work that we do um, reveals some of the hidden shackles, so to speak, some of the hidden reasons, even that is connected to I did a class called Mindfulness for Addiction. And the work that we did in there, they really got in touch with some of the background things that was contributing to their trauma. And I had one guy who was just um, bawling on men in prison don't like to cry, certainly not in front of other folks. He was just in tears. He was wailing in tears because, and it was a mourning and a celebration. He was mourning the fact that he had suffered for so long, um, and he was celebrating the fact that he now realized what one of the causes were for his downfall, so to speak. And and so he was eternally grateful. And so that kind of energy gets back to the housing units. And not that he's crying, but they respected him because of his size, and they hear how he's talking, and they see like his language, like how he's engaging others. There's a shift in, however small, right? There's a shift in how he even talks to other. His intentions, his desires, his goals might shift. So that inspires others as well, because they get to see the calm, and especially particularly when these guys are trying to sleep and struggling, and they get some tools to do that, and they're able to do it and say, hey, you should try this and this. So then everybody wants to sign up for the class, which is limited, so we can't have everyone sign up.
What impact does spirituality have in healing trauma?
I think spirituality is a profound role in healing trauma. I think historically, therapists and counselors and healers have kind of, um, it's like separating church from state. They've separated spirituality from therapy work. And spirituality is already a profound resource this person has, especially um, reconnecting to the sacred, right? So spirituality brings the sense that you're not alone. It brings the sense that there is something sacred bigger than you that has the power to uh, transform your suffering, if not deliver you from it, right? And so the spirituality that gives me the strength to kind of endure. And the Christian Bible in the book of Psalms says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, through my suffering, that is, I'm going to go through it. I'm not designed to stay there. And so spirituality reminds us that while suffering is a part of life, you can transform suffering. And suffering doesn't have to be your enemy; it can become a friend, so to speak. And what I mean by that is that the way we look at suffering, it can inform us about how we move forward in life. I mean, if I see suffering um, as a friend, it's less painful. It doesn't mean I don't feel the pain, but how I engage with the pain is differently than if I just see suffering as an enemy and think something to make my life miserable. There's a learning that can happen, a growing that can happen. As a matter of fact, I believe most of the times that we really grow is when we have had some level of suffering that we've grown. So I think spirituality is profound because you're not doing this journey by yourself. You're doing it with someone greater than you and more powerful than you. If that's your faith, whatever your faith is, but it's the belief that there's something bigger, right? And then I think the other thing that spirituality does is it brings in hope. It gives people a sense of hope, uh, hope for the future. And without hope, I mean, life just really sucks when you've lost hope. So those are some of the things that I think um, matters in spirituality. And then also, the act of prayers and meditation. For me, prayers are like meditation, and like meditation, prayers can have a common quality, can just help to one, it gives you self-expression. It gives you the space to kind of really pour your heart out and say what you have to say um, to someone that's not, or to the sacred that's not going to judge you, right? But can accept you for all of your success and all of your failures, and be with you in that moment. And it's a way to offer self-expression, offer self-empathy, and for you to be calm. For just that prayer can calm you. The act of praying um, can calm you, particularly in the Black and Brown tradition, and in the Black church. Prayer, the music is really important part of regulating us from the trauma of slavery, and the trauma of oppression, and the trauma of racism or structural racism. I think in many ways, that emerged in the Black church as a tool, a resource. So it was not just our uh, going to church was the act of being celebratory, the act of clapping our hands and dancing and moving was a part of, I don't think, I just understood this myself fairly recently. It was our body's way of trying to manage the enormous stress of generations of oppression and generation of being dehumanized. Um, so, um, so spirituality matters. I think it was the spirituality of the black church that had kept and held many black and brown people for those reasons. I don't know, and I speak for my own self personally, where I'd be if it hadn't been for my faith, if it hadn't been for my spirituality. The sense when you think all is lost, that you find hope in the sacred, and you find hope in God.
That makes so much sense. I'm thinking of I do work around mind body medicine, and one of the
Hmm.
practices that I introduce is expressive meditation, which is that
Hmm.
movement piece and that ability
Mm.
to sing and move, and
Hmm.
how healing that is for trauma.
Yes,
And
yes.
I never thought of it in that way to deal with racism and
Hmm.
slavery.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm so glad you
Yeah,
brought that.
I'm not sure if they were conscious about it. And we know from the science now that all of those things really impact trauma. Um, and there's one other thing that's connected to spirituality that is really important to me. Maybe two other things, and those things maybe they go together. Is gratitude and compassion as a spiritual practice. That when we are grateful, when we practice gratitude, and when we practice compassion, which practically all of the faith tradition teaches. Um, that love is everything, right? And so when we can have that as our ideal to learn how to be more compassionate, not only to others, Christian scripture says the greatest commandment is to love God and to love your neighbors as you love yourself. So it's to love the sacred, love the divine, love God, but also love other people and don't and love them like you love you. Like don't exclude yourself. I think a lot of folks exclude themselves when it comes to that love part. Like that, we feel freer to love other folks and feel like there's something wrong about if we love ourselves or even use those language about loving ourselves. And I think that's really important. The truth be told, we fully can't love others until we learn how to love ourselves. Um, when we learn how to love ourselves, to be empathetic to ourselves, wow, the capacity, the spaciousness to open to love others really is there because you're more grounded when you have empathy for yourself to be able to take the imperfections of others if it shows up in your space and therefore be able to be more patient, more compassionate, more kind, more loving to them because you're grounded in yourself with compassion and with love.
Hmm, I love that. I was listening to a podcast with Tara Brach, so a
Hmm.
Buddhist meditation teacher and
Hmm.
psychotherapist, and she was talking about it was about gratitude and generosity, and she
Hmm.
connected it to the breath, which I thought was really cool. And so she was talking about inhaling gratitude, so that's taking in the good,
Hmm.
and then exhaling generosity, and so giving
Hmm.
to others, which I thought was such a beautiful way to think about those two concepts and a cool practice too.
Yeah. Yeah, gratitude is life changing, and there's lots of science now coming showing how powerful it is. As a matter of fact, I think it was a course out of Yale University called The Science of Happiness, and essentially, um, the one thing I got out of that would the one ingredient, and there are many that has the most impact on your happiness was gratitude, was having a sense of gratitude about your life and practicing gratitude. And then there's a difference between practicing gratitude from your head and embodying gratitude. I am after the embodiment of gratitude, which is a longer, more enduring um, thing you have to fight for. It's easy for me just to say thank you without embodying thank you. And that language might be strange to some, How do you embody gratitude? How do you feel it? You can feel gratitude if you pay attention, right? If we pay attention to the times that we're grateful, there's a felt sense in our bodies about what that is. And the more, and our nervous system, the language of our nervous system is more felt sense than it is language, right? It's not the words that I use, but it's the felt sense that it recognizes more quickly. And so the more I can attune to what I'm feeling when I'm feeling gratitude, one is the more I can bring gratitude back up in my body because it literally affects all of my being, my mind, and um, my sense of peace and ease and hope. It's just a profound gift to practice gratitude. So if they get nothing else from this conversation, it would be practice gratitude. Practice, learn how to practice gratitude.
Yeah. I worked for a company who wrote journals for people living in prison. And so I worked on a journal specifically for gratitude. And one of the things that came up in some of our discovery sessions really was this concept of how sometimes gratitude gets weaponized, which is an interesting
Hmm.
concept in I feel like I think parents do this. I think it's kind of in
Mm,
a different few places, but it's you should be grateful or I should be
right.
grateful, which is more of that thinking gratitude I think you're speaking to versus the embodiment of
Hmm.
gratitude.
Yeah, and earlier you talk about what does language have to do with it? And this is a perfect example that the shoulds and coulds and have tos, that those language are disconnecting language, language that disconnect us from ourselves, disconnect us from other people, and certainly will disconnect us from the embodiment of feeling gratitude because should has this demand quality to it, right? I should. There is a criticism, a blame that I was doing something wrong and I should do this. And so we have to be even careful the language we use when we're practicing these things, that to be mindful that we're not using disconnecting language like shoulds, um, musts, um, because it does have effect on, I believe, on how we wire our nervous system to receive things and to hold things.
I had a lot of resistance as I was doing that work. I noticed how much resistance I had to the practice of gratitude, right? Like I can cognitively understand the benefits, but I think I'm not sure. I must have been told as a child like I should be grateful for what I have, and so I kind of
Mm,
have this hard aversion. And so it's taken me several years of practice to be able to feel gratitude, like you're talking about.
hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's beautiful that one you noticed your resistance, right? Awareness is so what a powerful gift that we become aware,
Hmm.
um, and to be able to be aware of our resistance. How beautiful is that? Then I can be curious, like, what's that about? Why is there resistance? Is this something from my past? Right? Is this the voice of my mother shoulding me, that I should be grateful? Then I shouldn't myself. I should be grateful, right? That kind of guilt that we put on ourselves, which certainly doesn't empower us, right? Really makes us feel somewhat beat up, and less open to really embrace gratitude because yeah, it's hard to be grateful when you're feeling guilt and shame at the same time.
Hmm. It really is. Yeah. Um, I'm curious, you have been in this work, it sounds like, for almost a decade, if not a decade. And I'm curious, what impact does the work have on you?
All of what I've shared, I so as a clergy, as a it has transformed how I engage my faith as a Christian man. Um, It has transformed um, the value of gratitude, like I've shared with you. It has really changed how I pray and how I value meditation. Now I am more inclined to do some breaths and to just calm my nervous system down before I jump into prayer. Um, I find it more enriching, more connecting. I feel more connected to God that way. Um, and and the work has really transformed my relationship with my wife and children. And when they say, Dad, you talk different, and I get it. It's not in no critical way. So it's a um, much more reflective, much more um, considerate of their feelings and needs. Um, and I have the language and the tools to kind of self-reflect when I get irritated, upset, and annoyed at things and at them. Um, that I'm able to pause without um, rushing forward with my what's the word I'm looking for? The demand that I'm the father, I'm the authority, I'm the parent, and you better listen to me. I have more grace with that authority to allow my children who are now young adults to have their say and to really hear what they're feeling and what their needs are. And so that's been huge. And so it's changed, it's transformed how I counsel others, how I sit with others, how I engage others, how I listen to others. Right? I feel equipped to really listen on a deeper level and to listen more empathetically than I did before. So it's been nothing but lots of goals. Just my life just feels very enriched because of this work. And the Christian would say, um, I tell people this all the time. I feel born again. I feel like I've been born again and again, right? Because the awareness of um, um, the information that I've come across and how it's informed my spirituality, informed my humanity has been uh, tremendous. It's been tremendous, and on a lot of levels, very healing for me as well. And I'm just really grateful for it because I'm not always successful, but at least I know I have the tools to sit with myself in a way that is I don't need to be coached. What I mean by that is I have the tools to inquire within myself certain things, and there are times where I do need to be coached. And so, and to so one of the things that's always been a struggle for me up until recently, meaning since I got involved with mindfulness in particular, is really feelings, being able to sit. I have a friend that says that men are mostly emotionally constipated, and I would agree that we don't have access to our emotions, and we're afraid of them. And I'm in a space now where I'm less afraid. I won't say I'm not afraid. There's still some spaces where there is some resistance, but boy, what a difference it is, and what a difference it is for me to talk about my feelings, which uh, I didn't feel I had permission to do before, just because of our culture. So that's those are some of the ways it's impacted me.
Mm, that's beautiful. Thank you. I have a lingering question that I'm hoping you can help clear up for me. So, in so many of the spiritual traditions, it's talked about how being a human is suffering. And I'm curious if you see trauma and suffering as the same thing, or do you see them different? It gets real sticky in my mind.
So it's a good question. Hmm. So it depends on how one defines suffering, right? So if suffering, so some define suffering as how I interpret. It's my interpretation of pain and challenge. Because I can have the pain and not suffer, but I can't suffer without pain, right? Some level of pain. And so there's some degree of suffering and trauma, right? And it depends on the kind of trauma. So and how severe the trauma is. Um, if I'm, if is it suffering if I'm not aware of it, right? Because oftentimes people are having trauma and they're not even aware. It's just normal to them. They're not even aware that um, it's the awareness, like, wow, this doesn't have to be this way. As one author wrote, it's not what's wrong with me, but what kind of happened to me, and to be able to notice what has happened to you, um, which can be labeled as trauma. So I do think trauma can have suffering in it, but um, they have an interesting intersection between the two of them. I see them kind of crisscrossing, right? Where there's a point where there's suffering and trauma, but I can suffer and it not be trauma. Yeah, I can have suffering and it not be traumatic. I can have feel like I lost my work and I'm struggling to find employment, and I feel like I'm suffering. I'm suffering emotionally. I'm suffering because I'm not able to provide for my family, but it not be a trauma. That doesn't haunt me. When I get a job, it's done and I move on. And I'm not triggered every time I see someone unemployed. Um, so those are that's the distinction for me right now.
Yeah.
How did that land for you?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the example helps. I think it's, you can have both, and suffering can be without trauma is really, that helps clear it up in my mind.
Amen.
Oh, I'm so glad you joined us today. I think so much of trauma work historically has focused on treating any mental illness or treating the mind. And I think we're starting to learn the impacts on the body. And I kind of get stuck there with the body, but then the spiritual piece is such an important layer of healing trauma. And so I'm just so glad you could be with us today.
My pleasure.
So as we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like for our listeners to know or understand?
No, I would say to the listeners out there that you are an amazing creature, creation from God, and that we all have the ability to heal and to be transformed and to live really wonderful lives, even if there's imperfect moments and experiences that we might have. To learn how to befriend those moments, to learn how to befriend ourselves and befriend our failures. Um, so we're more compassionate to ourselves and to others. And as I mentioned earlier, if I say nothing else, that to practice gratitude and compassion, um, and to uh, and to embrace your spirituality, your faith, uh, that can make all the difference in the world, not just for you, but for the folks around you. And we can change the world one contact, one connection at a time.
Well, thank you, Dr. Christie. It's been a joy to be with you today.
Likewise.
Thank you for listening to CASAT Conversations. your resource for exploring behavioral health topics. We hope you found today's conversation timely and meaningful. Please share this podcast with your friends and colleagues. If you want to learn more, visit us at our blog at CASATOnDemand.org.
CASAT Podcast Network. This podcast has been brought to you by the CASAT Podcast Network, located within the Center for the Application of Substance Abuse Technologies at the University of Nevada, Reno. For more podcasts, information, and resources, visit CASAT.org.